And the American people don't know about it because the New York Times wouldn't print the article I wrote about it, and the Pentagon is sitting on the information and won't allow it to be published.
When we talk about those running for president, I want to open people's eyes right now. Miss Clinton, as First Lady, met with a few Gulf War vets, knew there was a problem. What did they do? They formed a Presidential Advisory Committee, and through the whole course of that, and even when it got extended 18 months, we were still battling with that committee to get to the truth. They spent all the money, all the time and effort treating us psychologically. The research money that went into that direction. So, you know, they look good when you think, well, we got a Presidential Advisory Committee on Gulf War illness. The people that were put on those committees were there to delay us, to deny us. When we had anybody that would listen, officially, whatever, we were there telling them, pleading with them, pushing them, trying to convince them, trying to show them facts and figures. They blew us off and proceeded on their pre-planned agenda. And to believe that these guys are on TV giving 5-minute speeches on the Hill right now saying they support the troops. Where are they when you need them to sign on to bills and get bills through? First Lady Hillary Clinton, Senator. We had reports, we had meetings, hearings, and the Presidential Advisory Committee got extended another 18 months. And all during that time, all the research money and all the push was towards stress instead of the actual exposures and why we were sick and what help we really needed.
It was a sham. It was a trail of tears that paraded around this country, yanking the hearts out of veterans, thinking that they were going to get some resolution to their problems. I saw these troops, many of them, give up their last dollar to be able to go and speak before the commission, to help them understand that they really were sick. They had no idea what was really going on. You could see that this was just simply a situation where they tried to placate the veterans, quiet them down. The goal was find out what all these troops know, find out what documents they have, what evidence they have, get them to turn it over so that there won't be enough evidence out there that they can expose what really took place during the Gulf War. And I've talked to many physicians in the military who've told me, yeah, we know there really is an illness, but we're not allowed to treat for it. One physician told me he left the military based on the fact that he basically watched a troop die that they did not want to admit to chemical exposure.
They don't do this on their own. They do it when veterans get up there. We call it the squeaky wheel syndrome. We go up there and raise Cain with them when we get in the press to get action. Ask your Gulf War vets if they've had MRI, RSs, or SPECT scans showing the damage in their brain that is physical. Have they had viral testing? Have they had the testing they needed to guide them to the treatment that they need desperately? No. They've let us medically deteriorate in front of them.
And there were many moves, many conferences held in Washington to which I was frequently invited, and the result of all of these conferences was just eating sandwiches and drinking coffee and collecting government's per diem money and going back to their workplaces accomplishing nothing.
There are a number of people that the veterans would like to see on the Hall of Shame. General Franks, Secretary of Defense William Cohen, Secretary of Defense William Perry, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, General Shelley Kashvili, General Schwarzkopf, General Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Les Aspin, Secretary of Defense John Deutsch, Dr. Michael Kilpatrick, Dr. Winkenwerder, Dr. Stephen Joseph, who was really the first to be involved in the PTSD cover-up, Dr. Joyce Lashoff, who chaired the Presidential Advisory Commission, Lieutenant Colonel Vicki Merriman, Michael Fomento. He wasn't in the government, but he acted almost with them. He wrote Gulf War Syndrome. And I have to tell you, that is probably the hardest thing that ever happened for a Gulf War veteran, was to read how they were just making up the Gulf War illness. Michael Fomento did a tremendous disservice to the military, put more people, I think, on the verge of suicide than anyone ever did. in that one article in Reason magazine.
We have attempted to get members within each administration to act, and we have failed. We have only a handful of members of Congress that have done anything to attempt to help us. Christopher Shays, Bernard Sanders, Jim McDermott, Dennis Kucinich. We only have a handful.
In Congress, you've had your chance. Congressman McDermott gave you chances. Other congressmen tried to get bills on depleted uranium. They may have gotten 9 or 12 people to sign up on them, and nothing got into law except study it. That was by amendment, folded into another bill and hidden.
They've been briefed, they have read the material, they're aware of the casualties, and they abandon the American warrior in a time of need. That's inexcusable. They have to remember, we don't work for them, they work for us. And they must be held accountable. All the way up to the President of the United States must fulfill his obligation to provide medical care to all of us, to clean up the environment, but more important, they all must be held accountable because they allowed these wars to continue. Inexcusable. And they must be held accountable.
So we had to go to the states, Connecticut, Louisiana, New York, California, and we're trying to get them to enact laws in their state so at least their National Guard that the state has control over will test those troops the appropriate way, and getting money from the state to have that testing done. This is wrong.
Representative Jack Metcalf was very interested in the subject, and he knew very well what was happening. I was told by his people who came to the meeting, Joyce, the representative knows that you're telling the truth, but he can't publicly support you, was the statement they gave to me. I said, I'm not concerned about supporting me. That's not the issue. I'm concerned about him doing something for the military.
I sent those soldiers to the Persian Gulf. I voted to confront Saddam Hussein, get him out of Kuwait, not allow him to control nearly 50% of the world's oil, and amass an incredible military machine. I felt very right then when I voted to send our troops there, and I feel right now. But I have this aching heart that the soldiers I sent were not treated properly in terms of their potential exposure, and clearly not treated properly once they came home. And I have a hard time living with that.
I served proudly. I felt I was serving my country. I felt I was defending my country. I would fight for the American people. I would fight for the human rights. I would fight for freedom, but knowing what the Department of Defense has done to us, I wouldn't fight for the Department of Defense.
I used to go into Dr. Kilpatrick's office within the Department of Defense, and I would sit down and try to pick his brain and ask him, why do you feel that veterans are complaining? And he would say, because they want money.
They're lost in the system at the VA, fighting to get some little money to help them keep living. They can't work. They end up getting sicker. Their marriages take a hit. And they end up divorced. They end up homeless. And they're dying.
The Army provides great medical benefits for you and your family. I know that I can go to sick hall, or I can go to the doctor. Any kind of appointment that you would want to make on the civilian side, you can do that in the Army.
For all individuals that have been discharged from the Department of Defense, either in the U.S. Army Reserve, the National Guard, or in the active duty, over 205,000 as of Thanksgiving of 2006 have now gone to the VA as DNBI casualties seeking medical care, disease and non-battle injury. We're looking at 30 to 40% of all individuals becoming very ill and very sick.